Hello, welcome to Jessie at Home. This is Jessie. In this video I'm going to show you how to make this 6-petal flower. Okay, so you can see this 6-petal flower is made up of 1, 2, 3 rounds. So we're going to go through this one round at a time. And I'm going to give you little tricks as to how to start and stop each round and how to weave in your ends. You can see that each one of these rounds I have woven in my ends when the round is done. So at each point it has a finished look. So I'm going to show you how to do that. There's a few little in-the-know tricks to that. Oh, look at that one. There we go. That's right side up. I think I had showed it to you originally upside down. So I am using in this video Lion Brand Heartland yarn, which is a worsted weight yarn, and I am using a 6mm crochet hook, 6mm, which in the United States is also called a J hook, but the 6mm is standard, obviously, so is a universal measurement, millimeters. So let's go through this one round at a time. We will start with round 1, which is this little round piece. So to start off, you're going to chain 4 and join with a slip stitch to form a ring. Now you can start off by making your slip knot, but I'm going to show you one of those little tricks I talked about. I'm actually going to zoom in a tiny bit here so I don't have to keep lifting everything up. This way you can see a little closer what I'm doing. Okay. I'm actually not going to tighten my slip knot because I'm going to join into where the slip knot would be. So all I did was I wrapped the front, the tail, the cut end of my yarn over top of the working end of my yarn, and I'm just going to make my first chain and not pull it tight at all. I'm going to leave that really nice and loose. Okay, and then I'm going to make 3 more chains. 1, 2, 3. Now what I'm going to do is insert my hook into this big loopy bit I made at the beginning and do the slip stitch there. And then I can tighten it, and essentially I've slip stitched into the slip knot at the beginning of my round, at the beginning of my little ring. Okay, now we're going to chain 2, which will count as our first half double crochet, and then we're going to half double crochet 11 more, essentially giving us 12 half double crochets. So that was the chain 2, and now I need to make 11 half double crochets. You need the first time finding the center. The first stitch finding the center is usually the hardest. You can see that I'm actually going to work over top of the tail of my yarn to start the weaving in process. So, going to make 11 half double crochets. 1, 2, 3. Now if you don't know how to make these stitches, there are individual videos or lessons for each of the stitches I'm using in this pattern. But if you already know how to make those stitches, then you don't need to worry about that. And I lost count because I was talking to you. Okay, there's that first chain 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 half double crochets. 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay, now here's where I'm going to show you another little trick. I'm actually going to clip my yarn all the way over here, and I'm not going to join with a slip stitch to finish the round. I'm actually going to pull this yarn out because I'm going to make a duplicate stitch on top to make this a nice finished look. So first I'm going to thread the beginning tail onto my needle, and I'm going to pull. Remember we did all of those stitches over top of this beginning tail, which means this tail wraps all the way around this circle. So I can pull it and it tightens my circle. Sorry if I don't hold on to the middle, I can't really pull it, so sorry that I'm covering it up, but there we go, it tightens my circle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue running this yarn through about halfway around this circle one more time, okay? So about halfway around the circle. I just ran it right through all of those loops at the bottom of the circle. Okay, and there you can see now I can pull it really tight. Now, I always recommend doing two direction changes when you're weaving in your ends. So we were going this way, we were going clockwise. Now we're going to turn and go counterclockwise. Do not put your hook back in, put your needle back in exactly where it came out before, or you'll just pull your yarn out. You need to make sure that you catch a little piece of yarn, okay? So I need to either put my needle back in right here or back in over here. I do not want to put it exactly where it came out of. So I'm going to go back in. That's one direction change. Okay. Now you don't want to pull this really tight. I just pulled until it was buried. I did not yank it tight. If you start yanking everything tight, you'll get this really hard spot. It'll deform it'll change the shape of your piece, and you'll also get a really hard spot in your piece. You don't want that. So you just pull enough to get everything buried. And then I'm going to do a second direction change. Like I said, I recommend 2 direction changes. You can see I'm just going to pull until it's buried and leave it at that. So that is now woven in. Now, here's where we get our little fancy bit. We're going to thread the ending yarn back onto our needle. And we're going to join to the top of the second chain 2. So we're actually going to put our needle through the second chain 2. And now here is where, especially if you're a beginner, you want to count and make sure you have the right number. You should have 12 stitches, which means you should have 12 loops. This little piece spanning here is about to be a loop, so I need to count and make sure there's 11 other loops. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was 6. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is going to be loop number 12. So I know that I have that in the right place. If I had only 10, I'd need to move over this way. If I had 12, I'd need to move over 1 stitch this way, okay? So now what I'm going to do, since I had my 11 loops, I'm making loop number 12, is I'm going to put my hook, sorry, I keep saying hook, put my needle back into the same space. You see where this yarn came out? I'm going to put my needle back in that same space and run it through all the loops, all 3 of those loops. Okay? And then I'm also going to continue to weave it through a couple of the little stitches from the center. See that? That's all. That's how I bury that little end. Okay. Pull it. And you pull it tight enough so that you have the same size loop as the rest of them, but not so tight that it's smaller. Okay, and then again, 3 direction changes. Or, sorry, 2 direction changes. So here is my first direction change. I did go in this way, so now I'm going back that way for my first direction change. Again, not too tight. That was 1 direction change, and now here's my second direction change. Not too tight. Okay, so I will go through the rest of the weaving in ends a little quicker than that. I just wanted to make sure that you really understood for that very first one. And you can see here I have the center of my flower. Okay, now for round 2. I want to actually show you what to do if you're doing this in one solid color first, okay? And then we'll get back to changing colors. But if we were doing this in one solid color, when I got to the end of round 1, I would have slip stitched to the top of my chain 2 to join the round, like that. Okay? And then to start round 2, I would chain 2 and then double crochet into the same stitch, and that is going to count as our first double crochet cluster. I know it's not actually a double crochet cluster, but it is counting as our first double crochet cluster. Now we're going to chain 1, and we're going to make 11 double crochet cluster, chain 1, double crochet cluster, chain 1, double crochet cluster, chain 1, all the way around, which will be 11 more. So let me show you that double crochet cluster, and then we'll go back and I will show you how to do this with a color change. So the double crochet cluster is wrap your yarn around, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, and then you're going to do that same step again. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Now there's 3 loops on your hook, and you're going to yarn over, pull through everything, and then make a chain 1. And you're going to continue that around. So I will show you that some more on this piece. So now if you're changing colors of yarn, you can start off with a standing cluster, which is all sorts of fancy. Alright, so to start off, you need the loop on your hook. So you can see that I've taken my yarn, I've put it behind my hook, and then wrapped the cut end over top like that. And that's basically given me a loop on my hook. Now, the double crochet cluster starts with a yarn over. So I'm going to hold on to my tail so that things don't unwind, and I'm going to make a yarn over. And then I'm just going to insert my hook into any of these stitches. Doesn't matter which one, because this piece has been finished off. I'm going to yarn over and pull through, and there are 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2 of them. Gets a little tricky with this beginning stitch, okay? You'll get the hang of it. Yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Now there's 3 loops on your hook, and you can pull this tail to tighten up that very first loop. Yarn over, pull through all 3, and you've made a standing double crochet cluster. Chain 1. Okay, if you're just starting, even if you're using 2 different colors, you can always start off with the chain 3 and the double crochet in place of the standing cluster if the standing cluster was just a little too intimidating for you. But I encourage you to try it. You can always rewind and watch it over and over again until you get the hang of it, okay? So let's do a couple more clusters and then we'll finish off the round. Going to yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Now there's 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over, pull through all 3, and then make your chain. We'll do 1 more of those. Okay. And the chain. There you have it. We're going to keep doing that, and we'll have 12 all the way around. We are now at the end of round 2. You can see I have 12 sets of 2 double crochet cluster and chain 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I ended with my chain 1, and now we are going to clip and weave in our ends. So again, rather than doing the join with a slip stitch to form a round, I'm actually going to, after finishing my last chain, going to pinch it so I don't accidentally tighten it. I'm going to pull that cut end through. I am now going to thread the end that I just pulled through onto my needle. And now I'm going to make a new loop on top of the very first loop, the top of the very first cluster. So here's my first cluster, and you see this little loop that was on the top of the first cluster? I'm going to make a new loop on top of that. So you can see that the top of this cluster stitch, this loop goes through right here. So that's where I want to put my needle. I want to make sure that I'm going through the same place that this loop goes through, right here. And then I'm going to pull this, making sure that my new yarn is sitting on top of the old loop. I'm not going to pull it too tight. I'm trying to make a new loop. I am not trying to pull this loop all the way over to here. I'm making a new loop in between this loop and this loop. Okay, so I've got one side of it. Now to make the other side, I need to obviously go back down through this loop. Okay, and you can see now I've made that loop, and I want to pull it to the same size as the other loops. Now I'm going to turn over, and I'm going to run this thread through this stitch. Start at the top and just go through that stitch all the way down to the bottom of the stitch, trying to kind of go through the middle of the stitch. This is why I use a needle that has a point and not a blunt edge needle. I find that if I'm actually splitting through the yarn, my ends stay woven in a lot better, which is great if you're making something that gets washed. It's really a wonderful thing, or gets a lot of pull on it, like maybe a little accessory for kids' hair or something. Now I'm going to weave in my ends, and I'm going to do that by first going this way through several of these back loops. Okay. And now I'm going to do one direction change, going back this way. And my second direction change back this way. And as I said before, don't pull it tight. You pull it tight, you end up with a stiff spot. And I even like to give it kind of a little jiggle once I'm done to make sure that I didn't pull it too tight. Now I'm going to weave in the other end, the starting end. Maybe. There we go. Alright, so first I need to go back down through my stitch. You notice how I didn't put my hook in right here, because I would have then, that's where the yarn is coming out of right there. If I put my needle back in that same space, I'm going to unthread my, I'm going to unwrap my stitch. So I actually kind of went over that first bit and down through so that I don't accidentally unwrap my stitch. And I wove this side in going that way, so I'm going to weave this side in this direction so that I'm not weaving them in on top of each other, which again would cause extra bulk in my stitches, which I'm trying to avoid. And again, I'm not pulling tight. Here is my first direction change. And here is my second direction change. Always making sure not to go back in exactly where I came out. Give it a little tug and clip the ends. Okay, so you can see now we've completed round 2. We are now ready for round 3 of this flower. Okay, so that was round 1, and here shows round 2. And now we're going to work on round 3. And before I start showing it to you in the multiple colors, I'm going to show you how to do it if you're using just one color. And if you're wondering, this yarn, it is a 100% cotton yarn, because I'm showing you this in the example if you want to use it as a coaster. And I recommend something like cotton yarn. I recommend 100% cotton yarn for a coaster because it will wick in the moisture better than an acrylic will. And so this yarn was actually gifted to me by somebody who was clearing out her stash of yarns. I can't tell you exactly the brand or anything, but it's a 100% cotton yarn, and there's lots of them. Alright, so once you've finished round 2, if you are going to continue with the same color, and so you don't want to finish off like we just did, you are going to join with a slip stitch to the beginning of the chain 2 that we started this round with. So you're just going to insert your hook into the top of the chain 2, yarn over, and pull through everything on your hook, and that will start your that will finish off that round. Now, to begin the next round, you're actually going to have to go ahead and slip stitch into this space, this chain 1 space. You see how I have sets of cluster stitch, chain 1 space, cluster stitch, chain 1 space, cluster, chain 1, cluster, chain 1, cluster, chain 1, all the way around. Where I joined my round, I'm actually right in the middle of one of the clusters. So I'm going to insert my hook into the chain 1 space, yarn over, pull through everything on my hook, and that I split my yarn. It happens. Just take your hook out and put it back in the right place. And that now has moved me to where I need to be. That counts as my slip stitching into my first chain 1 space, and then from here I'm going to continue the round, which I'll show you on this piece. But let me show you the first petal on here, just to help you out here. So what you're going to do is you're going to make 6 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. On this round, we're only worrying about the chain 1 spaces. So we're going to make 6 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then you're going to slip stitch into the next chain 1 space. Okay? You're going to keep doing that all the way around. So let me show you on this piece how to do that with the color changes. So again, I'm going to get my little blue yarn here. And just like in the previous rounds, I'm going to start off by placing my hook on top of my yarn with my cut end here. So my working yarn is in front of the hook, in between me and the hook, and my cut end of my yarn is in back of the hook. I'm going to wrap it over and back to the back again to make that starting loop. Okay? You can make a slip knot if you're more comfortable with that. I do this because I find that it works and decreases the amount of bulk in my crochet, which is always nice. As long as you are able to weave in your ends well, it's okay that you're not starting off with a slip knot. Now again, this round is worked into the chain 1 spaces. It is not worked into the tops of the clusters. It's worked in the chain 1 spaces in between the clusters. So you're going to insert your hook into any of the chain 1 spaces you want. Doesn't matter which one. You are going to yarn over and you're going to pull through everything on your hook. And just like before, you can pull this tail to tighten that up. So that counts as your slip stitch in your first chain 1 space. So now you're going to place 6 double crochet in the next chain 1 space. And I'll show you 2 petals and then we'll go to the end. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now we're going to slip stitch into the next chain 1 space and 6 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and slip stitch into the next chain 1 space. You're going to continue this all the way around until you have 6 petals. So you can see I've completed all 6 of my petals and I have not done the very last slip stitch. So the last thing I did was the 6 double crochet into this chain 1 space, and now I'm going to clip my yarn. I'm going to hold on here and pull through. You always want to pinch before you pull the end of your yarn out so that you don't accidentally tighten up all of your stitches. Okay, so now, of course, as usual, I'm going to turn this work over. I'm going to thread up my clipped yarn onto my hook. Okay, I'm actually going to now basically duplicate the top of this slip stitch. So to do that, I'm going to see where this little loop that was at the beginning of our round is. I'm going to go ahead and insert my needle right through that same loop and pull that down and then turn this over so I can see the back of my stitch. I now want to go back down through the top of the double crochet, the last double crochet that I made. And that is going to duplicate that slip stitch, you see? I'm now going to weave in my ends. So to do that, I'm going to just go underneath all of these double crochets, and then I'm going to turn and come back the other way for my first direction change, and go back the other way for my second direction change, not pulling too tight. Okay, now weave in the other one, and I bet you know that we're not supposed to weave it in the same spot, right? So if I don't want to weave it in over here, that means I'm probably going to weave it in over here. So go ahead and weave it in underneath those double crochet. Turn and go back the other way. That's one change. Now let's go back for our second change. There we go. We've changed directions twice. I'm not pulling anything too tight. I'm giving a little wiggle to make sure that it's not too tight, and I'm clipping my ends. And there we have the nice flat six-pointed flower, and ending the cotton version is actually done the same way as ending the one color version is going to be done the same way as ending this version, because no matter what you're ending it at this point, this is the end of your flower. Alright, so there you have the 6-petal flower.